picture this. It's 4 o'clock in the morning and the Highway Patrol Officer, Senior Constable Peter Wallace over here on my right, has just knocked on the door of your parents' house to give them the terrible news. This is where the 4 o'clock knock comes from, obviously. Try to imagine, and Peter will talk about this when he speaks, try to imagine how devastating that would be for your family and friends and schoolmates, teachers, everyone. Nobody who has not gone through this could possibly understand how it must feel. We can't imagine how it must have felt for Vicky Corby when she got the call, or for Robin Hummel when she got the call, or for Dennis Kennedy's parents when they got the call. What we want to do tonight is try to prevent this happening to any other family in this region. The people that are going to speak to you this evening are going to give you very sound reasons why you should take more care on the roads. And when I say that, I'm not just talking to the young people, I'm talking to the older folk too. You parents have huge responsibilities, and I'll talk about that later, to set examples, to give them the experience, to be encouraging and supportive as they go forward in their driving career. If you don't do that, it's on your head. It's a huge responsibility you have as parents. Sadly, and quite frighteningly, 17 to 25-year-old drivers are 4 times more likely to crash or be in serious motor vehicle crashes than someone of my age, which no one's going to know how old that is. And you'll notice that Neil Simpson spoke about crashes, not accidents, and we're going to talk tonight about crashes. We're not going to talk about accidents. You don't accident a car, you crash a car. Invariably, they're avoidable. And if they're not avoidable, they could have been minimised with just a little bit more care. So we want to take that important distinction on board. This age group, 17 to 25s, accounts for between 29 and 32% of fatal crashes, but only account for about 15 to 17% of the driving population. Think about it. They're twice as represented as they are in crashes as they are in the driving population. And you've got to remember, and I'll mention it again later, that for every fatal crash, for every person killed in a car crash, there's between 8 and 11 that end up in wheelchairs, that end up in brain injury units, that end up in rehabilitation units, that end up in nursing homes, that don't ever go back to work. That's pretty serious stuff. When you think about 600 people a year being killed in New South Wales and you multiply that by between 8 and 11, let's say 10, that's 6,000 people a year. That's 6,000 families that are going through what Vicky Corby and Miles and their family are going through. As inexperienced drivers and passengers, it is quite natural that you're unaware of just how easily road trauma occurs. We are attempting tonight to give you sound reasons to get more experience, to take fewer risks, and to be positive in your behaviour when you're in cars with your friends. And we're going to, as I said before, and as Neil alluded to, we're going to give you some pretty sound strategies to stay safe in cars. I would mention to you that what we're talking about tonight is the thing that is most likely to hurt a young person. This is ahead of drugs, alcohol, other accidental deaths. This is the thing most likely to hurt young people. That's why we really do appreciate you coming and hope that you do take some note. So I'm going to introduce you now to Senior Constable Peter Wallace. Peter spoke at the inaugural seminar that we held here in Bateman's Bay way back on the 24th of November 1999 at the Catalina Country Club. And I think we had something like 430 people there, and Peter was the one that coined the phrase, stop the 4 o'clock knock, and I'm sure he's going to tell you exactly why he used that phrase at that time. Thanks, Peter.
What a great crowd, good to see. I was going to dress in court uniform tonight and wear my normal dress pants, but I thought chances are if you see me at work, you're going to see me wearing what I would wear at work, so I left these cargo pants on. You know our role, speed, fatigue, occupant restraint, so you don't need a lesson on that, you already know it, okay? I'm not going to threaten you with what the police will do. But what I will give you is 2 recent examples of slow learners, okay? Slow learner, red P-plater, young boy. First time I saw him, 132. He's allowed to do 90. So I said, what are you doing 132? Very bad attitude and a very bad answer. So boy's going to lose his licence, I'm sorry. You're doing 42 over the speed limit for you. 1 week later, same slow learner. This time it was only 112. Why are you going fast this time, young fellow? Similar answer, similar attitude. He got another one. Now he's going to lose it for 6 months. Okay? sometimes we marvel at what we see. Now, I'm not going to discuss Miles's prang or the court action that results from that, because I actually breath tested the young driver, and I'm pretty sure that's not finalised yet, so we won't discuss anything that's current, okay? But we and another police officer, there are several in this room tonight, because they're fathers just like me and you, we were astounded that night, and we discussed it at different levels, to get 2 more drink drivers, both red P-platers, from the same party that night that knew about the accident. And I'm not joking, because they both told us they knew about it. And one of them was on a dirt road sneaking somewhere, and one was on a main road sneaking somewhere else, all on the same night, same party, same group of friends, and they knew about that accident. And we were there while our wonderful ambos were trying to get him out of that car. It wasn't easy. We're very fortunate in this state to have the best ambulance service anywhere in the South Pacific. If our ambos don't get you to that hospital alive, no one could have. They are that good. We're very fortunate. So we know about what the police do. Some trivia, just some very simple stuff. We teach at the Traffic Offenders Program. If our magistrate thinks you're suitable, he'll send you to a Traffic Offenders Program. And there you get lectures on health, alcohol, social effects, and the police will turn up and usually give you a quick talk. Prior to 1982, and I'll look around the room for some people my age, I'm 43 years old, there was no real RBT, there was no such thing as RBT. The police had to have a good reason to stop you. Who in this room that had their licence before 1982 used to drink and drive? Be honest, hold your hand up. Now, see how I'm holding my hand up? Because before they started doing RBT, we all did it. And anyone who says they didn't might be fibbing. I won't say they are, but they're obviously very responsible. But because back then, we all did it. The legal limit was 08. It's been 05 for quite some time. So hands up out of all those people in the room who lost their licence when they first got it. Yeah, I'm standing here in a uniform. I'll tell you the truth. I lost mine 12 weeks after I got it. You know why? Because I was driving like a tool. And when I joined the police force several years later, the senior constable that took it off me laughed and said, young Mr. Wallace, I hope you drive better these days, son. And I went, oh, yes, I do, thanks. Yeah, and my father laughed his head off, jingled the keys, kept my panel van. I lived near the beach, surfboards, all that, and he thought it was hilarious. And I rode my push bike for 3 months, and I got my licence back, and I was much better now, thanks. And unfortunately, a lot of you young fellas, and I'm pointing at the boys, you forget that we were all there once too. And we're very fortunate that we've made it to become parents. And I guarantee you every parent in this room would love to become grandparents, okay? If you make the mistakes that some of your friends make, you're going to be on a push bike for a while. And God help you if you do lose it and you get caught driving whilst you're disqualified. Because I guarantee you that magistrates don't like that. Because they stand there, or they sit there on the bench, and they tell you your options. And they also tell you how long you've lost it for. So when we wheel you back in a month or 2 or 3 or a year later for driving whilst disqualified, he remembers you, he remembers everybody. He's not silly, it's a small community. He or she, there's lots of female magistrates. And they go, I remember the day I told you you were disqualified, young man, what are you doing? And, these are the scenarios that happen. So as far as RBT is concerned, one simple initiative brought in by the government in 1982. I'll do some math. I'm not going to point at anyone or make them answer me like I do at the Traffic Offenders Program. If 1,200 people per year died on our roads, which they used to, on average, I'll use zeros to make it easier. And if, for instance, it's 700 a year now, that's 500 people per year, isn't it? Okay, mathematically it's 500. So in 10 years, that's 5,000. In 20 years, it's 10,000. What's the population of Maria? Who wants to tell me? 6,000 or thereabouts. So if you think about it, a simple initiative brought in like random breath testing, because we all whinged like stuck pigs. Well, it has made a big difference. There are a lot of people alive on the roads in New South Wales today because of that simple initiative. You simply don't do it. Designated drivers, brilliant idea. We love it. Absolutely love it. If you've got a designated driver and you've got 4 pissed fools in your car with you, good. You've done well. We'll congratulate you. Off you go. Well done. We might get you out of the car. Don't be afraid, especially the girls. We might get you to get out of the car because our alcometers will pick up the scent of alcohol on your passengers. And we don't want to get a false reading on what you actually have in your lungs. So we'll say, hop out. and we'll wait until there's fresh air around your face because of what's in the car, and then we'll test you and it'll come up zero. So if ever we say, get out of the car, please, you're not in trouble. We just don't want the false reading that the alcohol on your passengers will give us. And you may well get arrested for something that you really didn't do because of the alcohol inside the car. And believe me, it does happen, especially when it's raining and all your windows are up. All right, now, one other thing is, who do you think has to go and tell your family? You all know who it is. We have to. We hate it. Absolutely. It's the hardest thing any of us can ever teach young police. Now, those other police in this room and those former police in this room, we all remember our first death message. Believe me, I always say to the young ones, just pretend that this young copper is about to tell your mother the bad news. And then you go in with the right mindset. Often we'll take a neighbour, because in some communities they've lived next door to one another for 30 odd years and they know the kids. Different ethnic groups face different problems for us. I've been chased back to a police car and the lady was going to kill both of us because we were the messengers. It was a kill the messenger scenario, and we had to reverse up the road, and this poor lady was screaming and running, and it was really quite distressing for everybody because her son had been killed in a car accident. And I'll tell you one, this is the worst one. One of our senior sergeants, I hate doing this, he got called to deliver a death message on a farm out of Cooma. And normally a farmhouse is within a kilometre or thereabouts of the main front gate, and everyone knows that usually, okay? Well, when he turned up, there were no lights on at all. And he thought, that's strange, farmhouses always have a light on. So he opened the gate, drove up, and when he drove up to the house, he parked the car. It was a police four-wheel drive. And when he got out of the car, he took 2 steps from the door of that car and the whole house exploded into the surprise party for the boy who was supposed to come home that night. They were all hiding in the house with all the lights turned off, and they all ran at him with streamers, and lights came on, and he collapsed on the bonnet of the car, and he just didn't know what to say. And that was the end of their surprise party. And I've done far too many of them over the years. I can remember the face on every single parent I've spoken to, every single one. I can even tell you most of their names, I'm sure, because we spend a lot of time with them. Once you go to a fatal accident, you're taken off the road for that shift to look after the family. That's all you do. And that's what you should expect from your police. That's their job. And we got called to 2 IPs one night. That's intoxicated persons in police radio talk, laying next to a motorbike in a park. And me and Sergeant Wilson from Bega both worked at Wollongong then, like most of us did. And we turned up, and I just walked over and went like that. I kicked the young fella on the foot because I wanted him to wake up because they were both drunk and asleep. Well, they weren't. They were dead because they rode at 120 kilometres an hour into a slippery dip. Big slippery dip in the park like that, and they rode into it chest height. And it killed them both. So we had to go and tell 2 lots of parents at the same time, and they were both only sons. Both families had daughters, both families only had one son. So Sergeant Wilson and I, Greg and I, thought, oh, geez, how are we going to do this? So we took a licence each. We took 2 cars and we went up to the house, and this is where it started for me and Frank. It was 4 a.m. and I knocked on the front door, and Mum always looks out the Venetian blind first. Dad always is still asleep because it's something in mothers, and they're beautiful and we love them for it, but they always wait until they hear you get home. They do. They know you're home. And she looked out the front Venetian blind, and we took her to the hospital, and they were very badly damaged, these young men. They were very badly hurt. And we had the morgue attendant help us present their sons in a way that they could actually not see how bad it was. And this beautiful mother, gee, she was a nice lady. I'll never forget the pair of them in 2 separate rooms. And all the police were in tears, the ambos were in tears, and she said, I kissed him when he was born, and I'm going in there and I'm kissing him when he goes. And she kissed him all over the areas that we left uncovered, and it was from his feet to his bottom to the back of his neck, because if we couldn't take the blanket off him, we had to keep it on, because if she saw what she was going to see, she would have died on us. So these are the things that the police hate doing. So we can easily prevent that by doing what we do. We know we sell the world's most unpopular product, believe me. What we hand through your window on a daily basis is something you don't want to leave with. You'd never planned on getting it, but a moment's inattention can sometimes result in you getting that. Okay? If it's serious, we'll arrest you. or we'll issue you with a field court attendance notice, and you'll go to court and you can stand there before a magistrate and you can say, Your Honour, I'm very sorry, I made a mistake, or you can say the police have made this up and I'm going to plead not guilty, and you can present your evidence. We're lucky we live in a democracy where we have that right. You can take it to wherever you want, and that's important. It is important that you teach your children the right thing to do, especially you girls, because you're so often a passenger, and it is so often a passenger that gets hurt. And I'm sorry, boys, but you are definitely the ones that commit the silly offences. Girls drive fast in a straight line on the mobile phone whilst doing their hair. Okay? Boys do burnouts, go around corners too fast, lose control, hit poles, kill the passenger. And unfortunately, that is a statistical truth. The teenager that had a crash at Rosedale, the back left passenger was killed. It's so common that the passenger is the one who gets it, and it's not good. All right, it is easily preventable. If you're ever in doubt, I'm going to tell my children, God help the boy that comes around to take my daughter out in the car. But I'm going to say the same thing. Ring me. I'll come and get you. I don't care if it's 3 o'clock in the morning. If you're at Maruya and you're a party, because I'm not leaving here, I'll work here till I'm retired. I've been here 10 years now. I've got about 12 to go. We'll go and pick them up. I know it's not always easy, but it's better than getting us coming around looking at the front and going, oh God, there's a police car at the front. We don't return videos after 11 p.m. We don't ring you about a lost wallet after 11 p.m. It's all done between 8 a.m. and probably 9 or 10 p.m. It's a day shift thing. Okay? I hope some of the little bits and pieces I've mentioned there do sink in, especially for you young boys. I'm not harping on it, but it is true. Okay, you girls are not overrepresented, but the boys are. Okay, and don't be one of the slow learners I mentioned at next year's talk. Okay, we've done this in a few parts of the state, and it actually does have an impact, and hopefully it will change your perception of the Highway Patrol and maybe your opinion of the police, because later on you can come up and ask me anything you want and I'll give you an honest answer. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce you now to Dr. Andrew Gibson, who's my doctor. And I'm still alive, so he must be pretty good. Andrew has spoken at quite a few of our seminars, and he's going to give us a bit of a medical perspective on what really serious motor vehicle trauma can be. Thanks, Andrew.
What I've been asked to speak to about tonight is injuries to the brain and the spinal cord. What's different about the brain and the spinal cord? I suppose the most important thing is that the brain is the computer. It's the control centre of the body. No brain, no life. All right. The spinal cord runs from the brain to the rest of the body, and it's like the telephone wires and lines that takes the message from the brain, from the computer, to all the various parts of the body, the arms, the legs, the stomach, the bowels, the bladder, sensation, movement, all the functions. The difference about the brain and the spinal cord compared to other parts of the body, apart from being essential for life, is that if they're injured, they don't regenerate. If you break a bone, the bone will mend. If you cut your skin, it can repair itself. But brain cells, once they're dead, they're gone. They can't regenerate. The same with spinal cord cells, nerve cells. Once they're dead, they can't regenerate. So in injuries involving the brain of the spinal cord, those cells that die as a result of the injury are gone. And for a person to function, they're dependent upon a number of things. A lot of cells in an injured brain or an injured spinal cord that are not dead may regain some of their function after the shock of the trauma goes away. Think of a person who's been knocked out. All right? It's like dropping a computer. It doesn't work for a while. So what happens after a serious brain insult in the form of trauma is that, to a varying degree, some brain cells are killed, damaged, destroyed. A number are just shocked, for want of a better word, and don't function. And a number may also not function because of the swelling that occurs as a result of an injury. So as time goes by, we hope that as the swelling goes down and the jolted brain cells recover, that a degree of function of the brain returns. And this is why we see, after an injury, people who might be unconscious and in a coma, sometimes with the help of medical treatment, and all the medical treatment is aimed at is to prevent the swelling, to ensure the brain gets adequate oxygen, to reduce any swelling, and to make sure that no further damage is done, that people wake up from their coma and to a varying degree regain normal function. But it's important to remember that once a brain cell is dead, it will never come back. The brain's very clever, fortunately, and it sometimes learns to do functions by using cells that haven't been damaged that weren't used before. So it develops alternate pathways, and that's another mechanism for recovery after a serious injury. I'd like to give a little bit of an anatomy lesson now, very short. As I said, the brain controls most functions of the body. It's the computer. No brain, no life, all right? If you cut somebody's head off, cut a chook's head off, the living creature dies. As I said, the spinal cord are the telephone lines to the body that transmit the messages from the brain so that the body functions. The degree of disability that people are left with after a brain injury or a spinal cord injury depends upon what part of the brain or the spinal cord has been irreparably damaged, what part of it, because different parts control different functions, and also how much of the brain or the spinal cord has been damaged. With regard to the spinal cord, the higher the damage to the spinal cord, the greater the defect. If you hang somebody, break their neck, break their spinal cord, they die. All right? Most spinal cord injuries occur because of fracture of the spinal column, and the spinal column is the vertebra through which the spinal cord runs and protects, forms your backbone and your neck, and protects the spinal cord. If the spinal column bones are broken, then unfortunately the spinal cord, which is a very soft structure, can be damaged. And depending where that happens will depend upon the degree of disability you have. If it occurs very high up and the nerves that control your breathing are damaged, you can't breathe. Now, you may or may not remember Christopher Reeve, the actor that played Superman, who fell from a horse and broke his neck. He had a very high spinal cord lesion and had to have a machine breathe for him through a tracheostomy. So that's an example of a very high spinal cord lesion. The further down you go, the less the disability. So if it's at a certain higher level, very high level, you're dead. If it's a little bit lower, you can't breathe, and if they get to you in time and institute some method to keep you breathing until you can put on a machine, you may survive. A little bit lower down, it would affect both your arms and both your legs, so that means you're a quadriplegic. Quad meaning four, all limbs, both arms, both legs. All right, so a quadriplegic has a high lesion, neck generally. Lower down, the breathing function may be preserved, the arms may be preserved, but you use the loss of your legs, and that person's a paraplegic. These are the Paralympians, the people who are in wheelchairs. They're in wheelchairs because they can't use their legs, and their injury has occurred somewhere, probably in their back. So that just explains. That's the anatomy lesson over. How are brains and spines injured in motor vehicle crashes? Well, I suppose the worst case scenario, and this unfortunately sometimes happens, people are decapitated in car crashes. Sometimes their heads are just pulverised, and obviously they die instantly. Another probably more common injury is what's called a contre-coup injury. And if anyone who does French, contre-coup means against the blow. If you can imagine that the skull is a rigid box made of bonehead. And inside that rigid box is a big lump of jelly. That's your brain. In normal life, your brain is a very sloppy, floppy, soft, delicate tissue. And it's bathed in cerebrospinal fluid. And what happens in a car accident very often is that you're travelling along at 100 kilometres an hour, and all of a sudden you hit another car or a tree, and you stop very suddenly. And what happens, inside your head, because your brain is a soft, very soft, very delicate structure, it continues to travel forward and compresses against the front of your skull. All right? And so even though the accident may be that you run into something, most of the brain damage is done by your brain continuing to travel in the same direction until it can go no further against the front of the skull. And that results in damage to soft brain tissue. It results in damage to the blood vessels supplying the brain cells. And it can lead to bleeding, which can be immediate, which is cerebral hemorrhage. And it's been described to doctors as like squirting a hose into sand. If you break an artery and it bleeds inside the brain, it's like squirting a high-pressure hose into sand. It just disintegrates it and blows it away. And the other type of bleeding injury is where a vein is broken and a big bruise forms inside the skull. And remember, I said the skull is a rigid box. The bruise keeps on getting bigger and bigger. If you can think of a cork on your leg, how it gets bigger the next day. Well, the same thing happens inside your head. But because your skull's made of bone, the bruise can't expand outwards and it expands inwards and pushes on the brain. And when it starts to push on the brain, you develop certain symptoms. And that's why if you've had a concussion, you're given a list at the hospital of things to watch out for, which are things like nausea, vomiting, becoming unconscious, fits, spasms, and it always amuses me, unusual behaviour, or double vision. And these are all symptoms of increasing intracranial pressure, which happens sometime after the injury. So those are the main sorts of injuries that occur to the brain. The main sorts of injuries that occur to the spinal cord result from the backbone or the neck being broken, and when that occurs, the delicate nerve fibres of the spinal cord are damaged. And as I said before, the level at which that happens determines on the disability, from death to no breathing to quadriplegia to paraplegia. Generally speaking, most of these types of injuries, the most common injury in a motor car accident or motor car crash is a brain injury, because generally these days people are wearing seatbelts, and unfortunately for younger people, a lot of them don't have airbags because they can't afford to buy the cars that have airbags, and that just seems to be a terrible problem. The people who most need the protection can't afford to buy the cars that have that, but that's another problem. So the most common injury of this type in motor car crashes are brain injuries, and they're either that the head is completely smashed or decapitated, which is not as common, but more likely the contre-coup type injury where the head is suddenly stopped accelerating and the brain is damaged inside. most motorcycle injuries are different. There's never an airbag at a motorbike. All you've got is a helmet. And so there's a much higher incidence of neck and back injuries on motorcycles, and probably the same number of brain injuries. So it's obviously much more dangerous to ride a motorcycle than it is to drive a motor car. So that's my small talk tonight, just about brains and spinal cords, the importance of, I guess, talking about brains and spinal cords at a night like tonight is for you to understand that once they're damaged, once brain cells and nerve cells are killed, that they're gone forever. You never get them back. You never get them back.
Thanks, Andrew. It's really a very real issue. Acquired brain injury, 70% of acquired brain injury is caused by motor vehicle crashes. It's really interesting, isn't it? So of all the people that we have in Australia that have acquired brain injuries, if we could get rid of the motor vehicle crash component, we'd reduce it by 70%. That's huge. I'm going to introduce you now to Dennis Kennedy, who is a paraplegic, who has been a paraplegic for most of his adult life, and he's going to give you his experience. Thanks, Dennis.
Yes, I am a spinal cord patient, and I've been in this damn wheelchair for 34 years, and I hate every minute of it. Every day I wake up and I look at that wheelchair and say, I wish to Christ I wasn't there. I think of all the things I would like to do. I think of all the things that I should be doing. I think of all the things that I could do. Then I get really pissed off with the things that I can't do. Like change a light bulb. God forbid rolling over tacks, puncturing my tyres. Just little things. But I could talk about that for quite some time. I was 21 when I had my accident. I was bulletproof, invincible. I knew everything. Parents were dumb. They didn't know anything. Didn't know a thing. I knew it all. I played in a rock and roll band. I was a hero. I rode a motorbike. I got all the chicks. I was having a great time. 21 years old, knew everything. And in 1971, for those of us who were there, and if you were in the 60s, they say, and if you can remember it, you really weren't there, but I remember it. It was a great time of life. Life was all about love, easy, growing your hair long. Well, looking at me today, it's a way of lying. How could you possibly have long hair? Well, I did. It was beautiful, long, curly. I had a long beard, and I had beards for every occasion. There were little goatees, there were everything else, and I just loved it. I loved playing in a rock and roll band, and we played the loudest music. I think I'm half deaf now from the music that we played back then. I don't know how and what we played, but we played. We loved it. But it was a great life. Then one Sunday afternoon, two mates of mine turned around to the house. Very easy thing to say is no, but as young people, 21, didn't matter how old you were, I was 21, they wanted me to go for a ride with them on their motorbikes. Really, really smart. So I got on the motorbike. I could have said no, but no, I got on the motorbike. Thank God I was wearing a helmet. Put a helmet on. I had a T-shirt, pretty cool. Had a little pair of sunglasses like John Lennon, that was even cooler. A pair of jeans, a pair of thongs, and I'm going for a ride on a motorbike, you dickhead. Away we go, for 60 kilometres. Wasn't a problem. On the return trip, the last one, three of us, and we decided that the last one back into West Wyalong on that particular night, 21, you know everything, the last one back into West Wyalong had to shout for the rest of the night. You're pretty dumb, isn't it? So we decided to race. Bearing in mind I was fully prepared. Helmet, T-shirt, pair of sunglasses, jeans and pair of thongs. Really crazy. Flat out on a motorbike. I'm not proud of it, far from it. But the best part about it, I suppose, is that I beat those blokes. I almost beat them to the grave. I wrapped myself around a big telephone post. And I was in hospital for 12 months. I broke my back in 3 places, about my chest, around my nipple area. As Dr. Andrew alluded to, the only thing that wasn't really damaged, although some people could debate it, was the brain. And the only reason it wasn't damaged was because I was wearing a helmet. And if ever you get on a motorbike, push bike, make sure you have a helmet on. Because looking at the helmet today, you'd swear blind that the helmet should have been cracked. It should have cracked my skull open. There wasn't one part of my body that wasn't broken from my chest up. Arms, collarbones, shoulders, fingers, wrists, elbows, ribs. Every single thing was broken. My parents, they were the ones that suffered. The stuff they gave me was called morphine. It was good stuff. We had a really, really good ride there for about 3 or 4 weeks on morphine. I knew nothing about it. My parents did. My mother cried. That wolf, that howling noise that a mother makes when her son or daughter's been hurt severely. I can still hear my mother scream. Even today, it daunts me, it haunts me. Every time I hear that squeal, that scream, you know damn well something's wrong. I could hear it. And it comes back to haunt me quite frequently. 12 months in hospital, and unfortunately, during the time I was in hospital, I guess when you're 21, there are only 2 or 3 things that really, really are on your brain. It's called sex. It's called beer. Then probably sex again. Now, I'm not being smart with what I'm saying there, but as a 21-year-old, that's what you think of. And at 21 years of age, you've got your whole life ahead of you. And no one talked to me when I was 21. This is in 1972. No one talked about it. No one talked about sex. I was 21, for God's sake, and no one had talked to me about it. I wanted to find out. Can I do it again? Can I get an erection? No, I can't. It didn't happen. For 34 years, it doesn't happen. To go to the toilet, it's a different kettle of fish again. I'm not going to go into the gruesome details. That's very private. However, suffice to say is that your whole life does change. You learn to live a different life. And because you have to learn to live a different life, things around you, the people around you change. Your parents change. You change. Your network of friends and family change. And as a result of everybody changing, they all change because they love you. The only people that I really, really hurt when I had my accident were my parents, my network of friends. I was smashed up, yeah. That's okay. I knew I'd be all right somehow. But it's my mother and my father. It's my brothers. It's my network of friends. The people who care for me. The people who really love me and show me support. And it's only through their support and their friendship and their longevity of love that they have for a person who's confined to a chair and things they can't do is just a wonderful testimony of their true friendship to a person who's in a wheelchair. When I had my 50th birthday, I sort of figured that I wasn't a very wealthy chap, but I'm still not. Probably the bank is. But the most important thing for me was friends. And I was living at that time at a little place called Hay, and I had people drive from Canberra. They came down from Brisbane for my 50th birthday, and I was very, very humbled. Most important thing is friends in your world. And that's why when you get into a car, they're usually with your friends. The hardest thing for you to do is to say no. That will be, and will always be, the hardest thing is to say no. You're going too fast. I don't like the way you're driving. I want to get home safe tonight. There are lots of different things that happen in our life that we can actually go on about, and really the causes and the consequences are all in our own psyche. In other words, we take control of who we are and what we do. If you want to jump onto a motorbike and grab hold of the throttle and screw its neck out, that's fine. If you want to get into a car, especially young men, we've all done it. The first thing you want to do is see how fast it can go. The second thing you want to do is see if it can corner well. Then when all those succeed, you then try it harder. I've done it. Most of us here have done it. And some of the things that we do are really, really, really dumb. Are really dumb. And every time I start talking about young men, especially men who are driving, I start thinking to myself, now, is that something that I would do? Is that something that my dad would allow me to do? Is that something that their parents would be proud of? Especially when I see probably 50 or 60 odd dollars of rubber being left in one spot. It doesn't make a great deal of sense. So boys, the only thing I can really tell you is that when you grab hold of the steering wheel, just let the testosterone level come down a bit. You don't have to impress the girls. You don't have to impress your mates. You don't have to see how fast the car can go. You don't have to see how much smoke it can do. It really, really is dumb. You'll sit back a bit later on after you've actually, probably Peter's grabbed hold of you, lost your licence, you're sitting in your bedroom, you say, what the hell did I do that for? Why did I do that? God, the old man's going to be pissed tonight when he sees me. Mum's going to be really, really upset. That's a consequence of your action. Each of your actions requires a consequence. The only people that you really will hurt when you do have an accident, apart from yourself, will be your family. They are the most important people to you. Although sometimes you might doubt it, but they are the most important people in your life. In conclusion, in my perspective of a person in a wheelchair, the things that I would like to have done, and I can't do it, and we all take it for granted. I'd love to have been a parent, to have my own children. Neil talked about how, sorry, not Neil, Dr. Andrew talked about how that when the spinal cord injury happens, that where the spinal cord has been cut, the functionality from there down doesn't work. And that really pisses me off. It annoys me. But you get on with it. You do other things. I would love to have my own children. I'd love to have been a parent. I'd love to see my kids grow up. I'd love to be able to climb a mountain. Coming down in a wheelchair would be easy. I'd love to be able to change a light bulb. Now, I know that sounds very, very innocuous, but God, how I'd love to sit up and be able just to change a light bulb. How I'd like to walk on the beach. If I wheel on the beach, I'd just get bogged. But just to go onto the beach and to crawl across the beach, in order for me to get to the beach, I've got to crawl on your backside to get to the damn beach. And when you get in the beach, you get dumped by a wave. So stay out. I would really not like to be in this wheelchair. But it was just through sheer stupidity on my behalf, and nobody else's fault, no one else, except mine. It took me a long time to say that it was my fault. I blamed God. I blamed the motorbike. I blamed the blokes I was with. I blamed anything, anybody, anywhere, at any time for 6 years. Until I realised one day it wasn't anybody else's fault except yours, dickhead. Mine. No one else's fault for you being in a wheelchair except you. Very, very simple. I'm responsible for my own actions.
Thanks, Dennis. I think it's pretty confronting when you have someone that sits in a wheelchair and says, for 34 years I've hated being in this wheelchair. We really do hope that none of you go through that. I don't talk about the key result areas of the police. Peter spoke about speed, alcohol, occupant restraint and fatigue. That's the key result areas, the 4 key result areas for the police. We talk about peer influence, risk-taking, overconfidence and inexperience. Just an example of peer influence. If there's 2 17-year-olds in the car, and this is from a medical journal, if there's 2 17-year-olds in the car, the chances of them having a fatal motor vehicle crash increase by 50%. So 3 in the car, 75, 160. 4 or more, over 200%. And we all know why, because when we're young, we have this natural propensity to egg each other on, to have the music up loud and to distract. And that's not a terrible thing, it's just a fact. So you need to empower yourself when you're in a situation where the driver isn't doing the right thing, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on, and say, no, I don't want to be in this situation. Young men have a natural, and we're getting stuck into young men tonight, but so be it. Young men have a natural propensity to take risks. Recent studies show that certain parts of young men's brains, those that deal with danger and risk-taking, don't mature until around 23 or 24 years of age. That's not a criticism again, it's a fact. According to the Federal Office of Road Safety, young men participate in risky driving practices to show off, to combat boredom, for excitement and to seek attention, among other reasons. Sorry boys, these are the facts. We need you all to take them on board. We need you to address this risk-taking behaviour and to channel it into positive parts of your lives. Cars are the worst possible place to take a risk. If you want to take a risk, go to the go-kart track and spend a few dollars and go go-kart racing. It's really safe and it's a really big buzz. Or go parachuting, or go bungee jumping. Controlled risks are fine, but cars and the roads are not a place to take a risk. In Australia in 2003, 412 under 25s died on the roads. Of these, only 88 were female, which means 324 young men died. We talked earlier about how many serious motor vehicle traumas happen for every fatal. If we then multiply these figures by that average of between 8 and 11, serious debilitating injuries. Injuries that put people in rehabilitation wards for years and years and years, that put Dennis Kennedy in a rehabilitation hospital for 12 months, that have caused Miles to go through endless grief this year, that have put young people in their early or late teens in nursing homes with elderly people where they're not supposed to be just because there's no one to look after them. So 8 to 11 for every fatal. So in 2003, the figures for boys were 3,844. Add that to the 324. And for girls, it was 1,640, which is even a higher rate. Add that to the 88. The rate for girls in that year was even higher. So you girls are not off the hook either. And so many young girls get killed in cars with young boys. And Robin's going to talk about that a little bit later on as well. Inexperience is something we can all do something about. And that includes you parents. Don't cheat on the logbooks. It takes 50 hours for a novice driver to get their eyes across above the bonnet of the car because they have to look to see what they're doing. I drive a Nissan Patrol 4-wheel drive and I can put that in any gear in night and day without having to look at the clutch, without having to look at the gear stick, and I know exactly where it is. I can feel it in the car. It's not because I'm a good driver, it's because I'm an experienced driver. And the only way to get experience is doing lots of hours. And we're talking about 100 to 120 hours before you get your Ps. That's 2 hours per week. That should be the minimum. And parents, when they ask you to take them for a lesson, and we're going to show some video later on all these reasons why you say no, we can't take you, it's too wet, it's a gravel road, it's a new car, tough. Statistically, learner drivers are the safest drivers on the road. So you don't have those excuses. The day they get their red Ps, they become statistically the most at risk. And that's what this whole evening's about. Don't be overconfident. There are enough problems out there already without adding to them. If it's raining, slow down. It's so vital that none of us underestimate the dangers of the road. Speed limits are just that, they're limits. It doesn't mean you have to go 60. So many young people I get in cars with will sit right on the speed limit. They won't speed, but they'll sit right on the speed limit and they'll sit right up the person in front's clacker and they'll say, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm not speeding. Well, you're not speeding, but you're driving at an unsafe speed, and there's a big difference there. Monash University Accident Research Centre tells us that young drivers, especially young men at you again, guys, are prone to overconfidence. The faster you go, the less reaction time you have. Think about your driving in a positive way. We want you to be safe drivers rather than good drivers. No one is bulletproof, and we are foolish if we think it can't happen to us. Each driver alone is responsible for his or her actions and responses to other traffic, even when other people make mistakes or do stupid or aggressive things. Only very rarely does someone else's action force you into a position that you could not possibly have anticipated and taken some action or reaction. For example, who takes their foot off the accelerator and has it hovering over the brake when approaching an intersection? Even when traffic lights control the intersection, red lights don't stop cars, people do. There's no big steel barrier that says that the car on your right's going to stop because it's the right's red. What if the other driver hasn't seen the red light? Happens all the time, and happened right outside the Westpac Bank there only a few months ago, and a four-wheel drive got rolled over because the guy went straight through the red light and the guy wasn't taking preemptive action. What about crests and curves? If you can't see over the hill, you should be scanning as far ahead as possible, ensuring that you are ready for any eventuality. Again, you should not be accelerating around curves or on crests, but maybe being ready to take avoiding action if there is a truck on your side of the road as you come around that corner or over that crest. Even in an overtaking lane, it's not the safest thing to do to overtake on a crest or curve. And I was telling someone earlier on tonight how coming in from Maloney's Beach where I live, there's an overtaking lane on the Princes Highway on a crest. And regularly, almost every morning when I come into town, I'm in the left-hand lane and I get overtaken. I'm doing 85, 90, which I think is pretty safe for that road, 100 zone, and I have people going past me with little kids in the car doing 110, 115 on the crest. That's really good luck if there's not something on your side of the road when you get over the top of the hill. Driving is a complex task and requires you to move in an environment that is constantly changing, among other drivers whose background and skill you know nothing of, in which people do not always do the expected or the correct things according to the rules. I want to talk to you briefly about turning negligence into diligence, and you'll notice there up on the slide I've talked about Dr. Ian Johnson and the AU Falcons. And think about that concept for a second, turning negligence into diligence. Everyone knows the AU Falcon ad where Dr. Ian Johnson stands in front of the two car, in between the two cars, and one's doing 60 and one's doing 65, and a truck appears and they both hit the anchors, and the one hitting 60 hits the truck at 5, and the one doing 65 hits it at 32. We all know that. And we know why, because you lose the greatest momentum in your braking manoeuvre over the last 15 metres. Let's put another car, another AU Falcon, exactly the same car, also only doing 60, the same as the one on my right. But at the critical moment when the truck appears, the dickhead looks down to pick up his Metallica CD and looks away for 1 second only 1 second. He hits the truck at 58.6 kilometres an hour. That's the price of negligence. That's why we've got to be diligent. You've heard, we talked about consequences. I think we've covered consequences to death. Dr. Andrew and Dennis, and later Vicky and Robin will talk about just what it is really like to be at the forefront of road trauma, and I don't want anyone here to go through it any more than we have already in this town. As drivers, you have a responsibility to think about your passengers' safety. Imagine being responsible for the rest of your life for the death or permanent injury of your best friend, or indeed for another family's grief, and Robin will talk about that grief later. As passengers, you also have responsibilities. You have a responsibility to wear your seatbelt, and it's amazing how many people get killed without seatbelts on. Unbelievable. Not to distract the driver by talking or having the music too loud, to not encourage risky behaviour. Equally, or perhaps more importantly, as passengers, you have rights. You have a right to not get in the first place. If you are nervous, you have the courage to let them know you have a right to say, take it easy and slow down, but it's vital that you do it. And I often tell what I call the vomit story. And there's a lady up in Taree rang me up about 12 months after I had a seminar up there, and she said, I just wanted to tell you the story about my daughter. We came to the seminar last year in Taree, and one of the things I say often in these seminars is that if you're a young girl and you're in a car and the driver won't slow down or stop and let you out so that you can ring your mum to come and get you, scream really loud, because they hate that. And if they still won't stop, say, I'm going to be sick, I'm going to vomit in your car, because they hate that even more. So it's really hard to get the smell out too. And this young girl did this, and she and her mate got out of the back of this car and they walked home 12 kilometres in 37-degree heat because her mobile phone wouldn't work out where they were. But she had the courage to do it. She empowered herself and said, I'm going to do this because I remember that guy saying it and I reckon I don't want to take this risk. And I thought, this whole program is worthwhile just for that one young girl. So have the power to empower yourselves, have the courage to empower yourselves and do it. I believe we as parents have a responsibility to give our kids as much experience and encouragement as possible to enable them to stay safe on the road. It just doesn't happen overnight. It's no use just giving them the bare minimum. You've got to give them as much as possible. Whenever you're going out, let them drive. As I said, in all conditions, at night, in heavy traffic. Statistically, the safest drivers on the road, and we know why, because you're always with them. We also have a responsibility to drive in the manner we expect them to drive. Psychological studies show that if we speed, they speed. If we drink and drive, so do they. If we don't wear seatbelts, they don't either. We must set the right examples as parents. And I don't mean just when they're teenagers, I mean from when they're real little too. We must, as parents, when the kids are in the car, and indeed at all times, show patience and courtesy. Knock off 5 to stay alive. It's a slogan from down Victoria Way. It's a great slogan. You never really have to go over the speed limit. Planning a journey, allowing an extra 5 to 10 minutes for a journey to discourage the temptation to speed. Make arrangements for getting home safely from parties, kids. Organise with your parents to pick you up. Organise to stay overnight. And one really good strategy is parents, stick $50 in a jar on top of the fridge and no one touches it until the teenager has to come home in a taxi, and that's what it's for. And tell them they can phone at any time with no recriminations, as Neil said earlier. It is so really vital that we give the kids these strategies to keep them safe on the roads. Says it all, doesn't it? And I'll leave you finally with the quote from Fabian Blattman. Fabian Blattman is a quadriplegic. Andrew explained what a quadriplegic was earlier. He won gold, silver and bronze at the 2000 Paralympic Games in Sydney. The exhilaration of the moment when you do take a risk on the road is hard to remember when you're lying in a hospital like Dennis was for 12 months, wondering what you're going to do with the rest of your life. I'm going to introduce you now to Vicky Corby. Two months or so ago, Vicky rang me and said that Miles wanted to help with the road safety program. How gutsy is that? This kid's got... This kid's gone through hell in the last 3 or 4 months, and so has his mum, and so have his mates, and a lot of them are here tonight. But I thought that was incredibly courageous that he wanted to come here tonight and bring his mum here to tell you what has happened to him and what it means to be a victim of major motor vehicle trauma. And the only reason he wants to do that is because he wants to prevent it happening to anyone else. I think that's terrific. Please welcome Vicky Corby.
Thanks. There's a whole heap of people here, which is excellent. And thanks to all your friends, Miles, that are here. I didn't get a 4 o'clock knock. I got a phone call at 11 o'clock saying that Miles had been seriously injured on Surf Beach Avenue. And I'm thinking, Surf Beach Avenue? Where's Surf Beach Avenue? It's directly off my street. I go on it every day. But the shock that you feel when somebody's telling you your son's hurt, and the policeman says to me, "Good luck, ma'am," and you know that this is not good. You know, what has happened? Why was Miles in a car? How could he be in a car? Because he didn't go in a car normally. Who was the driver? All the things that go through your mind. And then you just pray, God, just please keep my son alive. Because we all love our children, and the thought of not having them is just, you can't imagine. I had to get out my notes. I'll just tell you what happened to Miles after this accident. We went to Randwick, to the ICU there, which Miles was in for 3 weeks. In that 3 weeks, he was in a coma for 8 days of that. When he came out of the coma, We knew that he had brain injury. We didn't know whether he had spinal injuries. That was another few days before we found that out. Thank God we were lucky, you know, some people aren't, and my heart goes out to you for that. We left there. At that time, Miles couldn't walk. He couldn't talk. He had to learn all these things. We went to Liverpool then for another 5 weeks where he learnt to do all these things, which was very hard for him, very hard for us as a family. We've been back in Bateman's Bay now for... Miles's accident was the 6th of May, so we've been back here for a while. Miles has gone back to school part-time. He's getting his year 12, and thank you to the wonderful teachers. Neil, you have a wonderful staff that are going to get Miles through this. We'll get his year 12, maybe not the great year 12 that he may have got, but he's getting his year 12 anyway. And I'm really proud of him for that. I have to move this because I can't see. What I would like to say, and I've sort of gone a little bit further ahead, the Liverpool Brain Injury Unit has 16 beds in that unit. Out of those 16, 10 of those were young men aged 17 to 21 that were all passengers, every single one of them. Miles is a lot luckier than a lot of them. They will never have quality of life. They have major brain injuries. Their parents will be looking after them permanently 24 hours a day. A lot of them won't walk. Their lives are over. There's one boy in particular that I was affected by because you make friends with the parents when you're there. He was 17, he had an apprenticeship, everything to live for. He went out, he had family members in his car, he had his cousin, he had his partners, his father's partner's sister, daughter or 2 daughters. He killed the cousin. One of the daughters was killed and the other one's legs were crushed, who will now be in a wheelchair. He lived, but his quality of life, there isn't one. And that's what you kids all need to realise. It's just one split second, one choice. Miles made a bad choice. 1 minute that said, okay, I'm going to get in that car. If he'd have just... He had been drinking as well, so... Obviously, that's going to cloud his judgment. But if he had just not got in the car, you kids, you all know, you know what I'm like now. Please don't drive. Leave your car at home. Mum and Dad are going to come and get you. Like, all it takes is a phone call. As Frank said, $50 in a jar over the fridge, you know. If that kid needs to come home, okay, there's money there. I'll tell you about some of Miles's injuries that are, well, not going to get any better. Miles now wears glasses and contacts because of this injury. He hasn't got his contacts in at the moment, so he can't see all of you. That's how he's standing here probably. Because his aorta was nearly severed from his heart, he will now have surgery again 5 to 10 years from now. He'll be seeing a surgeon every year for the rest of his life, the heart surgeon. His teeth have been fixed temporarily. In another 5-7 years, he will have implants put in. He can no longer drive as the RTA has taken his licence until he sees a neurologist in 6 months' time and he's deemed fit to be able to drive. We're learning more every day about the effects of Miles's brain injury. They're the things that are coming up now that we never expected. We deal with it, we talk about it, we will cope with it. And like his friends, I just can't say enough about his friends because you guys are just so wonderful, sticking by Miles the way you have. It's wonderful. Miles went out there and he thought nothing will ever happen to me, like I'm bulletproof. As we said, but it did. He got in a car with a drink driver and this is the result of it. But what I'd like to say in all this is that young man that was driving now has got a lot ahead of him too. It's not just Miles with the injuries that he's got. It's also that young man. You know, he's going to go to court. I don't know what's going to happen to him, but I feel sorry for him. You know, I wish he hadn't hurt my son, but it was 1 minute, and it could be anybody's child here that could be in the position that the young driver is that was driving that car. He didn't set out to hurt Miles. Nobody ever sets out to hurt anybody else, but he did. And now he has to pay the consequences of the choices that he's made. So really, guys, it's all about choices. You know, don't make a decision that you know is the wrong decision, because there are consequences, absolutely. Thank you.
I'm going to introduce you now to Robin Hummel, who rang me a few weeks ago and said she'd like to tell you the story about Mitch and Jess, and I think this is pretty powerful too. Thanks, Robin.
Hello everyone, my name is Robin, and tonight I'd like to share with you all my experience, to the right, sorry, with the 4 o'clock knock. In May last year, my very best friend of 23 years, Therese, got the 4 o'clock knock. Therese was in hospital when her husband John had to give her the news of her son Mitch's accident. Therese was in hospital because she had just the day before had a major operation. Mitch was 19 and Jessie, his girlfriend of 4 years, was 18. They had been to visit Therese in hospital that night, and she later tells me of how happy and high in spirits they both were. They had it all. Mitch had just started his own transport company with a little truck running from Gosford to Newcastle each day, and Jessie got a job in an office, and it was her first day at the job. So they went off for dinner to celebrate after visiting Mitch's mum in hospital. They had jobs, they were in love, their life together was just beginning. Well, that all changed at 11 o'clock that night on their way home from dinner. Mitch hadn't been drinking, but he was speeding. He overtook a car on a narrow road, and when he was coming back over to the left-hand lane, he hit a pothole, which he didn't know was there, which made the car move onto the edge of the road, hit the loose gravel, spin out of control, and they slammed into a tree. Mitch's body took the impact of the crash with the tree on his side, and in turn with the speed and the impact of Mitch's body, broke Jessie's neck. She died instantly. No one knows how, but Mitch survived the accident and he was flown by helicopter to St George's Hospital in Sydney. I rushed to Gosford to be with my friend, and now our nightmare had just begun. Nothing would prepare me for what I was about to witness when I walked into intensive care to see Mitch. He looked so big and strong laying there, but he was wired up to what looked like every machine in the hospital had been used. He had a big bandage on his stomach where they had operated to stop the internal bleeding and take out his spleen. He had broken every major bone in his arms and upper legs and most of his ribs. But the biggest shock was seeing big, strong Mitchie laying there with his legs gone. His legs from his knees down had been ripped off on impact in the accident. 9 days we spent in ICU talking and praying for Mitch to get better. But then on May 27th, 2004, the doctors told Therese and John Mitch had lost so much blood from his legs in the accident. He had severe and irreversible brain damage. So Therese and John had to make the decision no parent should ever have to do and give permission for his life support to be turned off. My heart broke that afternoon when I saw Mitch take his last gasping breath. It broke for his parents. You see, Mitch was out of pain and was now with his Jessie, but his parents had just been sent to hell. I often think of how many people this accident affected. The lady who sat with Mitch while the ambulance got there, and yes, Mitch was conscious. The rescue people, the doctors, the nurses who I often saw crying, all of their family and friends, and my own personal battle of seeing Mitch lying there with his legs gone is hard to get out of my head. There are so many sad stories like this one out there. So please, guys, try and remember, don't send your family to hell. Speed maims and speed kills. Thank you.
There's been some pretty gutsy talks tonight, hasn't there? And that Vicky and Robin are just such amazing people to be able to do that. Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Vicky. And Miles, of course. It really has been a wonderful night, but thank you, more importantly, to all of you for coming. Please take care out there, and please, parents, give them as much experience as you can, because we really need to keep these kids safe on the roads. Thank you. Hang on, Peter wants something.
Just one thing for the young ones. Don't ever be afraid of the police, okay? We don't want you to be scared of the police. Be apprehensive, but don't be afraid of the cops. They're not out there deliberately to pick on you because you're young. You simply have P plates on your car, and unfortunately sometimes you advertise yourself by doing the wrong thing, but don't ever be afraid of the police. If you need us, you ring us. If you're scared, you be the one that rings the police, okay? Because we are parents just like every other parent in this room, and I want my children to make me a grandfather one day, just like your parents. They want you to become parents too, and you can't do that if you turn out like this, okay? Thanks.